My name is Sergeant Fran Kirby. I am 35 years old. I have been a military close protection officer for 9 years, and on the second day of a 3-country transit escort, I was sitting 3 seats behind a man named Victor Haig when he said something that should have been impossible for him to know. He said it quietly, not to me, to the air, or to himself, or to no one in particular, the way people say things when they want to see whether the person nearby catches it. I caught it. I gave him nothing. I kept my eyes on the window and my face entirely still, and I did not let what I was feeling reach any part of my expression. What he had said was 14 words. 14 words that referenced a specific, private plan that my sister Elena and I had talked about 2 weeks before she died. Elena had been dead for 6 years. No one else on Earth knew about that conversation. I kept my face still. I completed the mission. And then, when it was over, I spent 3 weeks finding out how Victor Haig had come to be in possession of a dead woman's private words.
Let me tell you about the mission first, because the mission matters and because the shape of it is what made what happened possible. Victor Haig was a high-value detainee. I am not authorized to tell you what he had done or what he was suspected of, or what the debriefing at the end of the transit was intended to establish. What I can tell you is that he was being moved from one country to another and then to a third, and that the transit took 3 days, and that I was assigned as one of 2 close protection officers responsible for his safety and containment during those 3 days. The assignment had come through Major Louise Tarn. She was my section commander, and she had briefed me in the standard way: the route, the protocols, the contingencies, the rules of engagement for the transit. She had also told me something slightly unusual. Haig had made a specific request regarding his escort detail. He had asked that at least one member of the escort be a female close protection officer from the corps I worked in, with recent multi-country transit experience and current clearance for the specific classification level of his transfer. The criteria were narrow enough that the eligible pool within the available roster was small. I was the most senior eligible officer available for the assignment window. The request had been written to produce someone like me, possibly to produce me specifically, but it had been framed broadly enough that it did not look like a targeted request. The request was unusual but not unprecedented. High-value detainees sometimes negotiate the terms of their cooperation, and the negotiation sometimes includes details of how they are handled in transit. The request had been granted. I had been assigned in part because of it. I had thought nothing of this at the time. I would think a great deal about it afterward. The first day of the transit was unremarkable in the way that close protection work is often unremarkable from the outside, composed and professional, and conducted according to a rhythm that looks to anyone watching like simple movement from one point to another. What it actually requires is sustained, precise attention to everything: the environment, the exits, the behavior of the principal, the behavior of anyone near the principal, the variables that could change at any moment and that you are already running contingencies for before they change. Haig was cooperative, contained. He spoke when he was spoken to and was quiet when he was not. He ate when food was provided. He slept on the first night with the particular efficiency of someone who has learned to sleep in difficult circumstances. He made no attempt to communicate with anyone outside the escort party. He gave no indication of anything other than a man in custody who had accepted that he was in custody and was managing himself accordingly. I watched him throughout the first day. I noted the way he held himself, the way his eyes moved when we transitioned between vehicles, the way he calibrated his responses, always slightly more cooperative than strictly necessary, in the manner of someone who understood that cooperation was a currency he might need later. He was intelligent. I had read his file, and the file had told me he was intelligent, but reading it and watching it operate in a moving vehicle over 12 hours are different things. By the end of the first day, I had a clear sense of him. I had not yet had cause to be alarmed by him. The second day. We were in a vehicle. a secure transfer vehicle. Nothing distinctive, the kind that looks from the outside like a commercial delivery van and is nothing of the sort on the inside. We were approximately 4 hours into the second leg of the transit. My colleague, Sergeant Dan Webb, was in the forward position. I was in the rear of the vehicle, 3 seats behind Haig, in the position I had held throughout the previous day. The vehicle was quiet. We had been quiet for approximately 40 minutes. And then Haig said, without looking at me, without any obvious direction or purpose, "You and your sister were going to open a bookshop in Edinburgh. You had already chosen the name." 14 words. I kept my eyes on the window. I kept my face still. I said nothing. He said nothing further. I watched him from behind my stillness for the next 4 hours. He did not look at me. He did not repeat the reference. He did not probe in any other direction. He had made his play and had received nothing and had filed the result and moved on, which was, in its own way, more unsettling than if he had pushed. A person who escalates when they miss is still trying. A person who simply notes the miss and recalibrates has learned something about you. He had learned that I did not break. The vehicle was quiet again. I sat in that quiet for the rest of the day, and I did not move my face, and I did not adjust my posture, and I did not give him a single thing to work with. Whatever he was waiting for, a flinch, a catch in the breath, a flicker of recognition that told him he had found the pressure point he was looking for, he did not get it from me. I had 9 years of this work. I had learned very early that the face is a communication tool and that in close protection work you control every transmission that face makes, especially the ones that are hardest to control. But I was shaking on the inside. Because Elena and I had talked about the bookshop. We had talked about it twice. Once, when we were driving somewhere together and the idea had come up as a kind of half-joke that had turned into a real conversation. And once, 2 weeks before the accident, when we had sat in her kitchen and drawn a rough sketch of the floor plan and chosen a name and laughed at ourselves for being serious about something we had not started yet. We had told no one. We had not told our parents. We had not told Chris Barlow, who was Elena's partner at the time. It had been ours, a plan in early progress, the kind of thing 2 sisters carry between them before it is ready to be anyone else's. Elena had died in the accident, 2 weeks after that kitchen conversation. The bookshop had never happened, and Victor Haig, in a secure transfer vehicle on the second day of a 3-country transit, had told me we had already chosen the name. The object at the center of everything was not a document or a photograph or a piece of evidence. It was a floor plan, a rough sketch, 2 pages of A4 paper that Elena and I had drawn in her kitchen on a Sunday afternoon 6 years ago, working out where the shelves would go and where we would put the reading chairs, and whether there was room for a small cafe section at the back. Her handwriting in the margins, my handwriting in the margins, the name we had chosen written at the top in Elena's hand, underlined twice because she had liked the sound of it. I had kept it. It had been in a folder in my flat for 6 years. I had not looked at it often. I had looked at it the night of her funeral, and I had looked at it on her birthday each year, and I had looked at it once when I was having a particular kind of difficult night and needed to feel her close. It was not something I had shown anyone. It was not something I had spoken of. It was simply there, in the folder, in the place where things live that are too important to throw away and too private to display. Victor Haig knew about the floor plan. He had not mentioned the floor plan directly. He had mentioned the plan it represented, the bookshop, the Edinburgh location, the name, which meant he knew not just the fact of the plan, but the detail of it, the specific conversations Elena and I had had, the specific things Elena had said about what the bookshop would be, and where it would be, and what it would be called. The only way he could know that was if Elena had told someone without knowing it mattered, as if that someone had been in her life in a way she had not understood fully, gathering, recording, building a picture of her that she had not known was being built. I sat in that vehicle for another 4 hours, and I did not say a word about any of this. The third day. The transit concluded at 13:40 on the third day. Haig was handed over to the debriefing facility's intake team. My colleague and I signed the handover documentation. We were debriefed on the transit by Major Tarn. The debrief was procedural and complete. I said nothing about what Haig had said in the vehicle on the second day. Not in the debrief, not to my colleague, not to Tarn. I needed to think before I spoke. I needed to understand what I had and what it meant before I put it into the institutional machinery, because once it was in the machinery, I would not control what happened to it, and I was not yet ready to not control what happened to it. I went back to my accommodation. I sat with what had happened for an entire evening, and then the next morning I submitted a formal intelligence referral.
The referral. I wrote it carefully. I documented Haig's exact words. I documented the date, the time, the location in the vehicle, my colleague's position, the absence of anyone else in earshot. I documented why the information should have been impossible for Haig to possess. I documented Elena, who she was, when she died, what the specific plan had been, who I was certain knew about it. I documented my certainty that no one outside Elena and me had been told about the Edinburgh plan before her death. I requested that Haig's intelligence file be cross-referenced against Elena's name and against any network or contact of his that might have had a connection to her life in the 3 to 5 years before the accident. I submitted it to Captain Diane North in the intelligence section. She processed it. The cross-reference results came back in 11 days. What the cross-reference found. I will not detail the full intelligence picture here. Some of it remains classified, some of it is not mine to describe, but the shape of what came back.
Elena Kirby had been connected, without her knowledge, to a network that Haig had operated within for approximately a decade. The connection had been indirect. She had not known Haig personally. She had known a woman named Sarah, who she had met through a running group 4 years before the accident, who she had considered a friend, who had in fact been a low-level operative for the network. Sarah's role had been the cultivation of unwitting sources, people whose social connections, workplace information, or personal knowledge might be useful to the network at some point. Elena had not been a target in any specific sense. She had simply been in Sarah's social circle, and Sarah had been doing what Sarah did, and Elena had talked about her life, the way people talk about their lives with friends they trust, and some of what Elena had said had been passed on, including, it appeared, conversations about her sister who worked in military close protection, including, it appeared, things Elena had shared about those conversations, private things, small things, the kind of things that seem like nothing when you are sharing them with a friend over coffee. The bookshop plan, the Edinburgh location, the name they had chosen. Elena had not known that sharing this with Sarah was anything other than talking to a friend. She had not known. I read the cross-reference results in Captain North's office, and I sat with them for a long time, and I said very little. North gave me time to sit with them. She did not fill the silence. I was grateful for that.
Elena, I want to tell you about her properly, because she deserves to be a person in this story rather than only an element of it. Elena Kirby was 28 years old when she died. She was 2 years younger than me. She had been a secondary school art teacher. She had been funny in the particular way of someone who finds the absurdity in things before anyone else has registered it. The quick observation, the dry delivery, the sense that she was watching the world with an eye for its contradictions and finding them more entertaining than alarming. She had loved Edinburgh. She had visited twice before she died and had talked about moving there. The bookshop had grown out of those visits, out of a specific shop she had walked into on a Saturday afternoon, the kind of shop that has sofas and cats and smells of paper and coffee, the kind of shop that makes you feel, for the duration of your time inside it, that the world is arranged correctly. She had drawn the floor plan with genuine seriousness. She had been the one who said Edinburgh, not me. She had been the one who suggested the cafe section at the back. She had been the one who chose the name, something with her handwriting underlining it twice, which was what she did when she had decided something and was not going to be argued out of it.
She had been dead for 6 years by the time Victor Haig said 14 words in a moving vehicle on a Wednesday afternoon. And when I read the cross-reference results and understood that her name had been in a file somewhere, that her conversations had been collected, that her openness with a person she trusted had been used as raw material for an intelligence network, I felt something that I am still not sure I have the right word for. Not anger, exactly. Anger was there, but it was not the primary thing. Something more like the particular grief of understanding that someone you loved was touched by something they did not know about and would never have consented to and could not be warned because they were gone. Something like retroactive violation, the knowledge that what happened to her information had happened after the fact, in her absence, and that she could not be told and could not react, and could not reclaim what had been taken without her knowing it was taken. She had been dead for 6 years, and I was only finding out now. That is the thing I sat with in Captain North's office for a long time.
Haig's purpose in the vehicle. I understood it more fully once the cross-reference results came back. He had engineered the escort assignment. He had requested a female close protection officer from my corps because he had identified me as Elena's sister through his own intelligence resources before the transit began. He had known about the Edinburgh plan. He had included it in the 14 words because he wanted to see whether the knowledge destabilized me, whether grief or shock or anger would surface in a way he could use during the transit. A destabilized escort officer is an exploitable one. A person who has just heard their dead sister's private words from a detainee's mouth is a person who might make decisions that compromise the mission. I had not been destabilized. I had given him nothing. But I had sat in that vehicle for the rest of the day carrying it, which was its own kind of weight, and the weight had been real, even if the surface had not shown it. I put that in my formal account as well. The fact that I had continued the mission without compromise. The fact that he had tried and it had not worked. Both mattered.
What happened to the referral? The intelligence picture Captain North's team built from the cross-reference was passed to the relevant authority. The information about Sarah, the woman Elena had trusted, was acted upon. I was told this formally and was not given the details because the details were not mine to have. The network Haig had been connected to was already the subject of the broader investigation that had produced his detention in the first place. The information about Elena's unwitting connection was one more thread in something much larger. I was not part of that investigation. My role had been the transit. My role had been the referral. Both were complete. Haig went into the debriefing process. What came out of it is classified. I was told, through official channels, that the cross-reference referral I had submitted had been of value to the broader investigation. I was told this in 3 sentences, and was thanked for the precision of the documentation. 3 sentences for Elena's name in a file. I understood that 3 sentences was what was available in that context, and I did not expect more.
Chris Barlow, Elena's partner at the time of her death. He had not known about the bookshop plan.
She had not told him because they had only been together for 8 months, and the bookshop was still a private thing between the two of us. He had moved on in the 6 years since Elena died. He was living in Bristol. He had a family now. I had stayed loosely in touch with him the way you stay in touch with the people who shared someone with you. Periodic messages at significant dates, the occasional photograph shared, the maintenance of a connection that exists because of a person who is no longer in the middle of it. I did not tell him about the cross-reference results, not because he did not deserve to know, but because what he deserved to know was that Elena had been a good person who had trusted the wrong person without knowing it, and he already knew that about her in the ways that mattered. What the intelligence file contained would not have given him anything except a specific new grief, and the specific new grief would not have helped him. I made that decision deliberately. I tell you about it because decisions about who gets to know what are part of this story, and I do not want to pretend I did not make them. I went back to the folder. 3 weeks after the transit, after the cross-reference results, after the formal account and the 3-sentence acknowledgement, and the long conversation I had with myself about what any of it meant, I went back to the folder and I took out the floor plan. 2 pages of A4, Elena's handwriting and mine, the name at the top in her hand, underlined twice. I had not looked at it since her last birthday, which had been 4 months before the transit. I looked at it for a long time. I thought about Victor Haig in the vehicle saying 14 words to see whether I would flinch. I thought about Elena in her kitchen on a Sunday afternoon, drawing the cafe section at the back, because she had decided there was room if you moved the shelves slightly. I thought about what it meant that a conversation in a kitchen had ended up in a file somewhere, carried by people who had used it as raw material for things Elena had not known existed. I thought about the difference between those 2 things, the kitchen and the file, and how Elena had only ever known about the kitchen.
The file was what someone else had done with the kitchen. It was not who Elena was. She was the kitchen. She was the floor plan. She was the name underlined twice. She was the person who said Edinburgh and meant it. The file cannot touch that. I have thought about this many times since. The file cannot touch that. Here is what 14 words in a moving vehicle taught me. The people who want to use us against ourselves look for the places where we are most human. They look for the names we carry, the plans we made that did not happen, the people who are gone. They look for those things because those things are where the armor is thinnest, where grief lives and where love lives, and where the professional distance between yourself and everything else becomes for a moment difficult to maintain. Victor Haig looked for Elena. He found her. He did not find what he was looking for when he found her, because I had 9 years of learning to hold my face still, and I had the particular determination of a person who understands that giving someone a reaction is a transaction they are not entitled to. But he had looked, and what he had found in looking, the fact that Elena's name was in that file, that her conversations had been collected, that her trust had been used, is not something I will entirely set down. It is something I carry. Not heavily, not in the way that weight becomes damage, but present. The knowledge that she had been in that file and had not known and could not know. I carry it the way I carry the floor plan, as something that is real and that belongs to her and that no file can change. What you are to the people who love you is not in any file. It is in the kitchen on a Sunday afternoon. It is the name you write at the top of a floor plan and underline twice because you have decided. Keep the floor plan, whatever yours is. Keep it. Drop a comment and tell me your story. I read every single one. And subscribe. I am here every week with a new story. She completed the mission.
She found out what he knew and how he knew it. The file could not touch what her sister had been.